All right, Joe's gonna count us down.
Going in three, two, one.
Okay, we back on online. This is Sekou Radio in Sarasota, Florida. Beautiful Florida in the winter. Today, our guest is Ryan Spasser, professional poker player. He's teaching us how you get into poker, how you adopt different strategy, how you focus. Ryan, let's go back when we left you on that first segment. We were talking about loose, passive, loose, aggressive, and what was the third one?
Then you have the good aggressive players, and
The good aggressive.
yeah.
All right. Now let's go back to that. That let's start over from that. Uh, would you mind describing those three type of play because it's similar to tennis and competition where you have different type of animal feeding themselves.
Yeah, so you want me to pick up off of the good aggressive player?
Yeah, pick up of the passive, aggressive. Those different. There's three different ones. You can elaborate on it.
So the good aggressive player, that's typically the person who's playing part time. It's a secondary source of income, or maybe it's a player playing full time like I am, or someone who just plays recreationally, but they're interested in the strategy and like in how to win in the game. And
Right.
a common acronym for good aggressive players is TAG, and that stands for tight aggressive. And that's a pretty effective strategy in almost any game you're playing in. And basically, a tight aggressive player or a good aggressive player, they understand that hand selection pre-flop impacts your ability to stay aggressive after the flop, and being able to stay aggressive while maintaining equity is what allows you to make profitable decisions on a regular basis, and because of that, it allows you to actually make money long term. So, a very very basic example of this would be, say, a loose passive player, like I described earlier. Say they call $3, and I'm in position, and I have a hand like ace nine that's unsuited. I have ace of club, nine of spade, and I decide I'm going to raise to $20. The loose passive player calls, and the flop comes 2, 7, 8, and there's a heart on the board. Well, say I bet and they call. On the turn, there's no way for me to pick up a flush draw or equity because I chose an offsuit hand pre-flop. But say in the exact same scenario, instead of choosing ace of clubs, nine of spades, I chose ace of hearts, nine of hearts. Well, now when I bet that flop and they call and the turn comes, say, a 10 of hearts, I now have an additional 20% equity in it. And because of this, it allows me to stay aggressive. And even if they call my second bet, I still can make the best hand around 20% of the time. And then because of that, it allows me to apply more pressure on a consistent basis. And that's kind of the summary of a tight aggressive strategy, is understanding that the hands you choose to play pre-flop impact your ability to stay aggressive and make profitable aggressive decisions after the flop.
All right. Now, that's pretty good explanations. Let's talk about how you create a system process. Because in anything, people have a strategy, how they create their own system. So I'm sure Ryan Spasser has his own system out there. How you go about that?
Well, this comes back to more of a personal note. Like I said, this is my first year doing this for a living, and over this first year, I guess the biggest lesson I learned was that having a system like outside of the game itself, and I'm just saying like on an overall approach to the game, I've learned that having a system is what really allows you to show up consistently and to play your best consistently. Um, in the past, I okay, so in the past, I tried to determine the length of play by the quality of the game, for example, and this is pretty common. Um, I think this is pretty common for a lot of players who are taking the game seriously to do this. Basically, if there say there's a Friday, actually a great example. I was playing before I started this interview with you at the local poker room, and my game was very, very good. A lot of players have a really hard time leaving a game that's very good because on certain hours, the game is just more profitable than in other hours because certain times of day there's certain players who like to play, and some players are they're less skilled, and um, it allows you to earn more money like in the long run against them. So in the past, I would say the game was especially good. I would want to play in that game for an extra 3 to 4 hours maybe, and it can and I've had some of my biggest wins as a result of making those decisions. But the the downside is it sacrifices your mental game a little bit, because since poker has luck involved, you can you can play an additional 3 to 4 hours in a game that's very good and very profitable, but because you're dealing with probabilities, sometimes you'll stay those 3 to 4 hours and you'll lose. And I think the insidious thing about that is what's really happening is you're putting your attention on something that's outside of your control, and what that ultimately leads to is frustration when things don't go your way, and frustration clouds judgment, and it creates a host of problems. So my approach and what I learned this year was that having a system that I can completely control gives me more peace of mind, and it allows me to show up on a more consistent basis. It allows me to think more clearly, because I'm not worried about uh, playing in the best games. I'm not worried about those kind of things that are ultimately outside of my control. I'm just focused on showing up on a regular basis, trying my best, being focused, taking breaks, and playing my best game. And I think having a system allows you to take your emotions out of things and see things more objectively, and that's incredibly important when you're playing cards for a living, and you're making trying to make decisions objectively as possible all the time.
Great. So you have your own system, the Ryan system.
Sure.
How you take a break when you're winning? Like you're on the roll, you're winning, and but the meantime, you've been on the table for a long time, and some people want to hold longer. Some people get out when we win is high. But for Ryan, what is the strategy? Did you stay on, or you give yourself certain time to get out, to get in? Just school us about this system.
Yeah, so it comes back to the system and how what I've learned over time, and is just taking. Let me start that over. I guess what I've learned over time is having so you have your system in place, and basically just sticking to that system is really important. So when it comes to taking breaks, um, basically, when I show up at a table, I turn my phone on the airplane mode, because I don't want any distractions. I don't want someone to call me in the middle of a hand if there's like, there may be $1,000 on the line, and I don't want someone calling me and distracting me what's going on.
Right.
So so
Yeah.
first step, phone goes on airplane, and that also prevents me from being distracted, looking at social media, or like, just stuff that's not relevant to what's happening in front of me. So phone goes on airplane, and I put my timer on, and if I'm playing a 5 hour session, I put 5 hours on the clock, and I have rules for myself. If I'm playing like a 5 hour session, I never play more than 2 hours consecutive. So what that means is if I have 5 hours on the clock, I start my timer, the card's in the air, and then I play my 2 hours. Um, I focus the best I can, play the best I can, and then regardless of what happens in that 2 hour span, um, when the 2 hours is up, I leave my chips at the table, but I take a break. I leave the room. I go outside. I find a secluded place. I do some stretching. I do some squats. Sometimes I do some yoga poses. I do some mindful walking. Some stuff I've learned in Buddhism was just meditate, like walking meditations, kind of getting me out of that analytical mindset and into more in touch with my surroundings, and like what's happening versus what
Right.
happened in the past, what's going on in the future. So it's just a practice to recenter myself and bring myself back to what's happening right around me. Um, and then at first it was really difficult to take these breaks because especially you're doing well. It's easy to be like, all right, I'm gonna play just one more hour, and then I'll take my break. But what I've learned over time is like there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but personally I find that having these like strict rules reinforces self-discipline, um, and I think that's really really important with poker because um, I guess just knowing in yourself that you have the self-discipline to do something as simple as take a break every 2 hours. I find that it gives me more confidence in other situations, um, where I need to like trust my process versus relying on thinking emotionally. So I think there's benefits outside that are a little bit intangible, and have to be experienced, but I think taking breaks is a good thing.
That's great. Great info. How you observe ego? Because I'm assuming if you have 9 people at the tables, you got a lot of different personality, different ego. How you go about selecting and dealing with this different type of ego on your table?
Yeah. So ego is a big thing. I'm sure you've experienced it in tennis, and it's everywhere in the world. This idea of entitlement, this idea of like self-importance, or that you deserve something. I think that attitude, and especially in poker, or pretty much anything though, um, really destroys any chance of being successful. And it's something that I struggle with every day. I think if anyone's being real, I think if everyone's being honest, I think everyone struggles with it to varying degrees. Um, and you see it a lot in a poker game. That it comes down to not wanting to be embarrassed, or not wanting to um, I don't know.